In June 2011, Family Mosaic invited people to take part in an online survey. We wanted to try and find out the answer to one key question. What is the future of social housing? Over 380 people responded. 20% were tenants, about 70% worked in the sector, and the others included board members, consultants, and private rental sector tenants. We presented them with 4 possible models for housing associations: to be a housing developer, to focus on being a good landlord, to build communities as well as homes, or Housing Plus, and to help people move on from social housing. We asked each respondent to rank these models in order of preference. And the results? Well, the most popular choice was that we should focus on being a good landlord, closely followed by Housing Plus, then building more homes, and finally, move on. Over 40% of tenants wanted us to focus on being a good landlord, while for those in the housing sector, Housing Plus was the most favoured first choice. For the remainder, the most popular first preference was a tie between developing new homes and building communities. When we look at people's fourth choice, we can see a sense of unease around the prospect of housing associations having to move on their tenants. Almost half of all respondents had move on as their fourth preference. Those in the sector were similarly reticent. Tenants were the most concerned. Almost 60% had move on as their fourth preference. So what does this tell us? That people are wary about the prospect of housing associations having to move on their tenants? Yes. That people in the sector feel that they should be doing more than just housing people? Kind of. And that people who rent houses from social landlords want them to focus on quality services? Definitely. To find out more, we invited respondents to leave a comment about the future of social housing. Over half of them did, and these are some of them, voiced by members of staff at Family Mosaic. First, there were those who wanted us to focus on building new homes.
Building more homes must be your #1 priority at this time.
Build more homes. Build more homes. Build more homes.
Then there were those who wanted us to focus on being a good landlord.
You've got to get the basics right. You've got to provide a service that meets the needs of the tenants, like an efficient and responsive repairs service.
Landlord services isn't an option. It's your bread and butter and has to be done.
Get it right and there can be multiple benefits.
If you give people with limited financial means a stable home, it creates a sound environment for them to raise families and develop as individuals. It adds social value and reduces demand on other public services like health and social services.
This was reflected by people who thought we should be playing a Housing Plus role, building communities as well as homes.
Good Housing Plus achieves pride and ownership. It creates communities and areas where people feel safe and want to live.
There is quantifiable evidence that customers actually benefit from the additional services that are provided. As an example, the decrease in rent arrears as a result of welfare rights support is measurable and keeps communities together.
Some, however, did not agree.
Housing Plus is nice, but there are other agencies who can do this in partnership with you, so it's not really core business.
Stick to what you're good at. Don't try to be a jack of all trades and master of none.
Finally, the issue of move on. This was the focus of the majority of the comments. Some expressed support for fixed tenancies.
A home for life has become more difficult to justify. Social housing is more scarce than it's ever been.
I think the attitudes of many residents in social housing need to change. Obtaining a property with a subsidised rent should be seen as a privilege and not a right.
Others disagreed.
If tenants have to leave their home after a fixed time, they won't look after it. Flats will be more damaged and it will be an extra cost for housing associations.
Fixed tenancies are a response to a housing shortage, not to the needs of tenants. They need secure, long-term housing so that they can meaningfully contribute to their local community.
One suggested Move On could have a significant impact.
There should be a target of, say, moving on 5% of tenants a year, which for many of the larger associations is over 1,000 homes.
But the introduction of Move On, some warned, has to be communicated carefully.
There is a culture of fear being created. Vulnerable tenants are becoming afraid of losing their housing.
If working and progressing puts my accommodation situation in danger, what should I do? Should I claim benefits and be a drain on society just so I can keep my home?
For two current tenants, moving on wasn't an option.
I'm a Family Mosaic resident in London. I work hard to give my children a good example that being on benefits is not a lifestyle choice. I earn a fair wage, but I could not afford to rent in the private sector.
Unfortunately, as a single parent in the lower end of income levels, it is not a case of social housing being unaffordable, but rather anything else is unaffordable.
So what about the future of social housing?
I think the most relevant approach to social housing should be a combination of Housing Plus and Move On, with an emphasis on providing tenants with support to eventually move on from social housing to make way for others in need, whilst recognising that there are some vulnerable tenants who may require long-term support and social housing.
Or, as one put it more succinctly,
hand up or hand out is the wrong question, because the answer is both.
At Family Mosaic, we realise we can't prioritise all of these options. In 2012, we'll be talking to our partners and deciding what is important to us. Others may reach different conclusions, and this may lead to a more diverse sector. That would be something we welcome. We thank all those who have contributed to the debate so far.